Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here. This is Milan Patel and Kyle King. We're representing IBM and ArchetypeSC, and today we want to navigate you through the landscape of digital identities. So we'll be reviewing the product IBM Verify, and what we'll aim to do is walk through the fabric of what all of our organizations are consisted of, our digital identities. As the threat landscape changes in the cybersecurity world, we have to advance to surpass those challenges and those threats. The foundational success of all of our organizations rests in these digital identities and how to protect them. I'm excited to share insights on the proactive approach to defending these digital identities through new innovative solutions offered by IBM Verify. Verify is an industry-leading tool in the identity management framework, in the top right quadrant, by the way. A comprehensive solution designed to fortify identity security in a holistic and adaptive manner. Whether your organization is at the beginning of its identity management journey or already on the path, IBM Verify meets you where you are. Verify offers flexibility to define an augmented identity fabric and to provide full end-to-end solutioning for identity and access management. We'll dive into the product Verify and the identity fabric that it consists of, which Milan will lead us through. Common challenges like credential theft, phishing attacks, and insider threats are compounded by unique organizational details. The good news for users is IBM Verify is designated to address the challenges to stay ahead and streamline IAM processes and practices. Verify will uncover the tools and strategies that will empower our organizations to not only defend our digital identities, but stay ahead of the curve and move forward for the thinking of IAM best practices. Milan will expand on Verify Identity Fabric, but keep in mind while he speaks how your organizations currently deploy IAM practices and what identity challenges you currently are facing that could be solved by IBM Verify. I want us all to walk away from this session with an understanding on how to enhance our cybersecurity posture and manage identity risks effectively. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Milan.
Hey. I'll walk around. Thanks, Kyle. So in the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to walk through just some of the things that we're seeing as it relates to digital identity. You're going to see some demos in terms of how we're addressing that, what are the capabilities, and what are the outcomes we're delivering upon as we think about these expanded threats. The key things here are the enterprise has a lot of IAM tools. There's key properties of how we need to get visibility, orchestrate, and then augment it with intelligence. So those are the three key themes we're going to be talking about, but I'll take you through sort of how we're seeing the problem evolve, data points behind the problem, and how we're looking and proposing to solve some of these with our IAM platform. So the first thing first, hackers don't break in, they log in. If you think about that, this is driven through a lot of things like compromised credentials, phishing, and we'll get into some of the details. But think about all the attacks that you've seen, right? This is not just workforce IAM attacks. This is consumer. A quintessential one here is 23andMe. It's got DNA data. They got hacked through credential stuffing attacks, and all 6-7 million user populations that they've had, they were compromised in the sense that all the information was leaked. They didn't break in, they logged in with common credentials, right? So how are we thinking about proactively getting ahead of these types of attacks? How are we getting visibility to understand these attacks? And how are we orchestrating that? That's fundamentally what we're going to be talking about in the context of this next 20 minutes. And we're really diving deep into this problem. So a few data points here. IBM every year delivers what is called the cost of data breach. It's a yearly report that gets into very key details by industry, by geography, by attack vector type of what is the cost of a data breach in the context of various enterprises and use cases. Now, a lot of the talk is around things like data security or a SIM, but when we fundamentally think about that, the top two leading vectors of attack are phishing and social engineering. What is the perimeter that would address that at scale where the attacks are occurring, right? It's a robust identity and access management solution. So There's a report out there that could be identified. There's a report that you can get that gives you some of the fundamental details around the cost of data breach. But two things really jump out. First, the cost, $4.88 million for the average cost of a single data breach. That's pretty profound. Typically, this is an afterthought. People look at modernizing their IAM solutions, implementing phishing-resistant technology for authentication, introducing risk-based authentication once an attack has occurred, not before, right? So this is fundamentally thinking about how do we put IAM at the beginning and the forefront before some of these things happen. Second, the type of information being leaked isn't, insignificant, right? It's personal identifiable information. It's leaked passwords that then get reused across other accounts. So the question is, how do we stay ahead of that, right? So this is fundamentally the challenge that organizations are struggling with in terms of data breaches and protecting identities. Now, the other thing that makes it even more difficult is identity complex. So who here in the room on paper can say they have a strategic identity provider and they're consolidating it to the strategic identity provider? Okay, keep your hands up. Do you still have other identity providers that exist in your enterprise? Okay, so this gets into the realities and the actual complexities. The reality, the promising idea here is, yeah, we're picking a strategic identity provider, moving all our apps to that identity provider. But you get to a point where you hit 60, 70% of your apps are moved, but things are doing header-based authentication, cookie-based authentication, legacy authentication that you can't then bring into the modernized IDP. You also have registries of users that exist in various local accounts, whether they're an LDAP, whether in a custom database, right? Those prohibit you from getting to that strategic identity provider. So when we think about the actual realities is there's multiple IAM tools, there's multiple risk tools, there's multiple identity providers, there's multiple multi-factor authentication providers. So the real problem for the enterprise is, how do we orchestrate that? How do we bring it together? And how do we meet the challenges that fundamentally exist, which is this nature of complexity and sprawl across the enterprise? So how is IBM looking at the problem, right? So first is, we're looking at this in the context of both consumer and workforce identities, right? People that are external users to the organizations, people that are internal users to the organization. I'll give you two quick examples. So internally in IBM, the product that I'm going to be showing you in my 3 demos is actually the tool we use internally in IBM. Every IBMer, 270,000 plus IBMers, use passkeys as a way to log in every single day, and across all of our applications. Okay, so we have here at least 2 factors of MFA and passwordless, QR codes, another way that we log in. We also have state governments that we support. So this is a consumer IAM use case, 8.6 million citizens. They have actually rolled out passkeys as well as a way to provide phishing-resistant authentication, addressing the user experience, but also enhancing the security. But when we think about that, what were the pieces that allowed them to realize that? Because they had existing technologies. They had existing directories. They had legacy applications that needed to be modernized. They needed to add risk-based authentication. And then they all needed a central view to orchestrate this across the board. So when we think about the identity fabric and the pieces that are needed to fundamentally address, to allow for a robust IAM modernization, as well as getting full visibility, these are the pieces that we think about. So just going left to right, it all starts about your users, right? How do you centralize user management? How do you get visibility into what your users are doing? You may have 4 representations of an employee, local accounts, they're in their enterprise, their strategic identity providers, right? But there's also other representations of them. They could be a local account on a Windows server that's an admin doing admin activities, right? Those aren't necessarily represented in your enterprise identity provider or the strategic enterprise identity provider. So the question is, how do you consolidate that? How do you bring that together? The next thing is, now that you've attempted or evaluated consolidating your users, how do you provide robust and modern authentication? This is beyond simple username and password. This is things like getting as basic as doing TOTP, getting basic as doing QR code, but more strategically, how do you deliver phishing-resistant authentication realized with passkeys to some of your legacy apps, right, that aren't coded or aren't refactored to do that, right? So there's a position and a consideration there, because at the end of the day, you want to drive consistency across how users interact with systems. The next thing is how do you then centralize and orchestrate those entire set of experiences across legacy applications, across modern applications, across where users live. And you need something that really allows you to systematically, for example, migrate a user that's in a legacy LDAP, bring them to the strategic identity provider, but also in the process have them enroll in a passkey. So the next time they log in, they're already primed for modern authentication. So this is actually one of the demos that I'm going to be showing you as it relates to these things. So 3 fundamental pillars that I'm going to be talking about, right? So I think the expectation here is, we're embarking on doing single sign-on with SAML or OpenID Connect, right? We have already started looking at doing things around adding multi-factor authentication, right? What we're seeing now is how customers, partners, and how Archetype's helping in terms of getting to the next level of driving consistent orchestration across the IAM stack, getting intelligence quicker, shifting left in identifying threats, and augmenting intelligence into the IAM system, right? So the first set of things that you'll see, and I'll walk you through with a demo, is how can orchestration help not only simplify what IAM admins or stakeholders do that manage IAM systems experience, how can they drive efficiencies in their job, but how can you get and correlate a lot of the tools that are in the enterprise and bring them together to deliver that identity fabric realization, right? Getting and driving consistency in terms of policy enforcement, assessing risk, right? And even streamlining the adoption of modern phishing-resistant authentication. The second thing that we'll talk about is IAM systems have visibility into a lot of data, a lot of intelligence. Who's accessing which app? What IP address are they coming from? What browser are they using? What location are they coming from, right? Are they typing their credentials in a different cadence that they've typically done? This is what we call detecting risk, assessing and shifting the identification of fraudulent users, fraudulent IP addresses, use of compromised credentials, moving that to the left. Because the IAM system is able to detect this, it can also easily remediate it based on policy, right? So I'll talk to you about how that, as part of the identity fabric, is getting more threat and risk aware and shifting that left. And then the last thing, as we think about expanding this, right? So you talk about the complexities of the IAM system, the amount of information that is visible and available. How do we summarize this? How do we simplify the insights that are captured into something that an IAM admin doesn't have to correlate many events to get understanding for? How can we simplify configuration? How do we set up an app? How do we create an access policy without having to know which attributes to use or what policies or enforcements to do? Why can't we use natural language to do that, right? So you're going to start seeing, as we talk about this, orchestrated, remediating threats and mitigating threats, and augmenting intelligence to IAM systems as enterprises continue to modernize, but also stay ahead of these threats. So with that, I'm going to show you the first demo. Now, to set the context of the use case, I alluded it to earlier, but this is pretty flexible in what it can do. So what you're going to be seeing is an orchestration engine. And this orchestration engine, the use case that you're going to see is the following. Users will reside in an LDAP or an AD, Active Directory, on-prem. What we're going to do is we're going to have the user log in. Upon logging in, what we're going to do is we're going to just-in-time provision them or create that user in what you're going to see is Verify's cloud directory. We're also going to, in that time, migrate the user's password. And we're also then going to check to see if that user has a passkey enrolled. And if they don't, we're going to prompt them for a passkey. So the next time they log in, they're going to use passkeys as the primary mode of authenticating. And that's going to be driven through Verify's flow designer, as well as the ability to connect to other identity providers using identity agents and so on. So let's walk through this. So this is the actual workflow. It's called identifier first for passkeys and migration. Notice there's a workflow. So the workflow is going to ask for the user's username, fetch the user, determine which identity provider they live in. Based on determining which identity provider they live in, they're going to check to see if that user is enrolled in a passkey. If they're not enrolled in a passkey, they're going to prompt the user for the passkey, and then they're going to enroll the user in the passkey. The next time the user logs in, they're going to be using a passkey. So this is the first time the user is logging in. So notice it's a where are you from scenario where you type in the username, routes the user to the right identity provider, and I'm going to type in my credentials there. And this is basically sourcing Active Directory. So that's the identity provider being used. Notice how now it's checking for a passkey. User doesn't have a passkey. They're going to require them to enroll in a passkey. And they're going to configure it to their Chrome profile or Apple Cloud account or any other account. They're naming their passkey, so they're going through the ceremony of registering their passkey. And once they've done that, they've essentially logged in. Okay, so this could be a consumer portal. This is a launchpad of enterprise applications, but this is just to give you a sense. The next time the user logs in, they're just going to type in their username. In the video, I actually notice how a passkey is now detected. A passkey is detected on the page, and now the user's actually using a passkey as the mode to authenticate. So in that entire workflow, we basically migrated a user, checked an authentication enrollment, and prompted them to use passkeys as the primary mode for authentication, right? So that was all orchestrated. Other use cases here are expandable, right? So think about, does anyone have external identities they manage here, or it's all workforce? Show of hands. External identity. So an external identity use case could be a registration experience. While requesting for consent, do you agree to these terms and conditions? And then centrally enforcing that using Verify, for example. So that's a way to orchestrate registration, login, password reset, MFA enrollment. These are all the things that could be defined using our orchestration engine to deliver the outcomes that are necessary in this context. Okay, the next use case is around detecting and remediating threats. So what you're going to see here is a few things. So Verify has what we call a native threat detection and remediation set of capabilities, in the sense that I'm going to walk you through a funnel for a user as they log in. Okay? The first thing is they land on a login page, right? That is hosted by either your identity provider or a custom application that you've built. The first thing we're going to check is the IP address that the user's logging in from, is it a suspicious or a compromised IP address? And there's a set of analysis that we do under the covers to detect, credential stuffing, attacks that have come from that IP address, compromised credential attacks, brute force attacks. We have feeds that we source that are actionable IPs. So before a user even attempts to log in, we're checking to see if there's a threat, right, based on the IP address. The next thing we do is, okay, they're good. The IP is good. What we're then going to do is we're then going to have the user log in, and we'll source to see if users are using compromised credentials. So we have feeds that we build into our login process that determine if users are using compromised, stolen, or phished credentials. And what you're going to see here is a set of reports that provide you the insights into all of that. Okay? And then the last thing we do is, okay, users not coming in from a suspicious IP, users not using compromised credentials, the user is going to have their risk score detected. Are they coming in from a different location? I'm in North Carolina, and I have a session in North Carolina, but I see another login attempt from South America, right? That's an impossible travel situation, right? And we'll detect that per authentication, and we'll do a risk evaluation of that. So what you're going to see in this demo is a few things. This is the standard dashboard for Verify. You're going to see the last 30 days, there's a spike of 6,000 failed attempts. We're first going to go into the threat detection. You can see the types of attacks that the platform has seen. We're now going into the password intelligence. Is the user using compromised credentials? and you'll be able to see that level of visibility. So real quick, notice on the left-hand side, you have applications and directory and all that. This is a full-fledged IAM solution. This is where you onboard your apps, manage your users, access policies, and so on. Here, I'm just showing you the reports and the visibility. And then here, this last one, we're actually assessing the risk score of the user on authentication. We're looking at information such as what browser are they using, what location are they coming in from, is the device with malware, is it a remote access tool being used to authenticate the user, what internet service provider are they using. These are all the context pieces that we then analyze to understand and evaluate the risk score every time the user authenticates. Okay, so now we've talked about orchestrating, we've talked about detecting threats across the identity fabric, and now we're going to talk about how we're augmenting intelligence. So this is going to build on a few things. One is the threat report you saw. Notice that there were 4 or 5 threats, which have a whole bunch of events in them. One of the things that we've done is you'll see when I go into the report now, there's this AI thing. We're actually using watsonx as a way to provide summarization of threats. So now I have a chat assistant where I can ask questions and say, summarize the threats. And it gives you a natural language summary of the threats that have happened. And you can additionally have conversational aspects about this. Understanding who are the compromised users, what applications were accessed during this, what management activities did these compromised users perform. And now you're basically simplifying what the IAM admin needs to do in managing these systems, rather than having to go to an events database, correlate this data, write scripts or Python scripts to understand this and represent it. We're now embedding this natively, right, as an experience. So that's one thing. So summarization is one use case that we're building upon. The next one is actually generation. So what you're going to see here is I'm actually going to use natural language to create an access policy that enforces passkeys for users in the admin group, and it's going to block otherwise. So notice I'm just using natural language to say require FIDO2 for admins or users in the admin group, otherwise block. So I'm writing that down. It got generated, and now I go into the access policy. Notice the tags that are associated with each access policy. So the system knows that it was generated with the assistant, and notice what the policy then rendered associated with that. So this is then the access policy you would apply to applications as individuals log in. So with that, I know probably a little bit out of time, maybe a little bit over. Hopefully this was informative, but 2 things here. One is on the left, you have the product, IBM Verified, that I just walked you through. You can spin up a free trial, reach out to me, and I'll make sure that you have what you need. You have all the things that we've just talked about, so you can start leveraging it, trying it. It's a 90-day trial. You get single sign-on, multi-factor, risk-based authentication. But if you want it extended, we're happy to work with you. And from an archetype standpoint, we have consulting that they can offer. There's a identity assessment that can be done. So please engage them as well in terms of staging how you would modernize, how you would identify the problems, and then Verify would be the technology that would help you realize those based on what I've described here. So thanks for taking the time. Thanks for spending your afternoon before lunch. And we'll end there. Any questions?
Thank you.
No? Okay. Thank you.